Look at these ancient cathedrals of Europe, especially the Reims Cathedral. Its walls seem filled with mystery and power. The stone appears alive, as if it carries a symphony not created by the hands of ordinary people. How is such a thing possible? Century after century, these grand buildings stand unshaken, astonishing the imagination with their beauty, precision, and scale. And all of this was built many centuries ago, when there was no electricity, no machines, no modern tools, only people, stone, and horses. History says that construction began in the 13th century and lasted only a few decades. Yet the technology of that time appears very simple and even primitive. Stonemasons worked by hand, lifting devices were basic, and transport relied on horses and sledges. How could they build not just a structure, but an architectural masterpiece? A masterpiece comparable to modern achievements under such conditions? Immediately the question arises, why were construction skills at such a high level, as if they knew the secrets of science and engineering, while other areas of life remained stuck in medieval everyday life? This question is not a small one. Moreover, the Reims Cathedral is not an exception. This cathedral is only the tip of a huge iceberg of oddities and mysteries in history. Why does official science often explain its construction as a miracle of medieval genius? Perhaps the truth is that behind the facade of familiar history lies a deeper, hidden reality. What if these cathedrals are not just monuments of medieval architectural genius? What if they are evidence of something we are not being told? What happens if you take a closer look at the legends, chronicles, and architectural puzzles? Ahead lies a story that will make you rethink the familiar understanding of the past and uncover secrets hidden behind the stone facades of centuries-old cathedrals. Next, we will dive into the details. First, we will examine how the construction was actually organized and why the logic of ordinary explanations does not withstand the test of time. Century after century, myths record strange things surrounding these grand constructions. Hundreds of thousands of tons of stone that demand attention. Where did the materials come from? The quarries from which the stone was taken are unknown, and there are no detailed records about delivery routes or massive transportation operations. Imagine, millions of tons of this stone symphony had to be transported for hundreds of kilometers without modern roads or transport. And what about the workers' camp? Where are the descriptions of the infrastructure? The official chronicles barely mention hundreds or thousands of laborers with sleeping quarters and workshops. The technology of that time was primitive, which makes the entire scale of construction look like a miracle. How did a primitive medieval society solve tasks equal to modern logistics? This is where a tight knot of suspicion forms. The level of architecture seems too disproportionate to the technologies surrounding it. Another repeating theme: fires. Stone cathedrals were often built on the sites of burned wooden structures. These fires seem too frequent and too convenient as pre-stories. They look almost designed to explain the beginning of grand constructions and to create the illusion of historical continuity. Doesn't it seem strange that almost every great temple had a predecessor that conveniently burned down? And then there are the figures of the shadow architects. Names like the mysterious Jean, about whom almost nothing is known, no biographies, no drawings, no students to carry on their knowledge. Sometimes a single name is used to explain buildings erected hundreds of years apart. These architectural legends look like patches created to fit astonishing buildings into an official timeline that seems unwilling to reveal their true origins. In the end, it feels as if the traditional explanations are just a facade. Behind it, there are far more mysteries than answers. The size of the Rheims Cathedral destroys any idea of what medieval technology could have been. Its length is almost 150 meters. Its interior dimensions are impressive. A nave 38 meters high and 15 meters wide, like a massive stone ship reaching for the sky. The total area is several thousand square meters, and the two towers on the facade rise to 80 meters, like a modern 26-story building. And yet no modern cranes, concrete, or electricity were used during construction. All the work was done by hand and with horses. Everything stone, from the heavy foundation to the finest statues, was carved from limestone, taken from quarries long forgotten today. Such scale seemed impossible for its era, and yet construction progressed quickly, just a few decades, to build such a giant. And still there are almost no detailed records about logistics, quarry locations, or labor organization. Traces of large workers' camps and infrastructure, which would be absolutely necessary for a project of this size, are mysteriously absent. All this leads to one thought. If such a level of craftsmanship was possible at that stage of development, then the sources of knowledge and technology must have been different from what modern historians imagine. What is even more surprising is that history tells us about recurring fires that supposedly destroyed old wooden churches, making room for stone cathedrals. These fires look suspiciously convenient, as if planned to justify the appearance of stone architectural marvels and to adjust the chronology. And the legends about architects with almost mystical names, Jean d'Orbay, Jean Leloup, Gaucher de Reims, resemble ghosts. Their lives have no real documents, no drawings, no apprentices, and attributing buildings to them, sometimes constructed centuries apart, becomes more and more difficult. When you compare the size of the cathedral, the conditions, and the real data, it feels as if official history is constructed in a way that hides the true scale and origins of these buildings. In the 13th century, when the construction of the Rheims Cathedral began, the population of France was roughly between 13 and 20 million people. At that time, France was much smaller in territory than it is today, but it was already one of the most densely populated countries in Western Europe. Compared to this large total population, the cities themselves were relatively small. For example, Paris had around 200,000 inhabitants, and most people lived in rural areas engaged in agriculture and crafts. However, it is important to understand one thing. The majority of the population was scattered across villages, where the level of technology and work organization was extremely low. Medieval society did not yet have a developed industrial infrastructure, logistics, or structured management of large-scale projects. Yet at the same time, millions of tons of stone had to be extracted and transported. Thousands of components had to be manufactured, and the construction of a giant, such as the Rheims Cathedral, had to be planned and coordinated. How does this align with the official narrative? There are no large-scale descriptions of work organization, no major workers' camps, no production facilities that could have supported such a project mentioned in the chronicles. This raises serious questions about who and how managed to accomplish such projects. If the majority of the population lived in rural areas with minimal technological capability, then how did so many highly skilled craftsmen and workers appear? perhaps the official demographic understanding of the era hides some important details, little-known sources, or alternative facts that change the entire picture, especially if we take into account mysterious interruptions and natural disasters that repeatedly reduced Europe's population, yet left behind these enormous constructions. Over the past 200 years, according to official statistics, population numbers have grown steadily and predictably. Take, for example, England and Spain. In the 19th century, the population of these countries reached hundreds of millions. In the second half of the 18th century, less than 100. By the early 19th century, a little more than 300 million. And by the 19th century, already close to 1 billion. Everything seems logical, stable, gradual growth. But now let's reverse the arrow of time and apply the same rate of decline moving backward. If we move from the 19th century to the 16th and 13th centuries, the numbers become terrifying. By the 13th century, at the time when the great Gothic cathedrals were built, the entire human population would supposedly be only about 18,000 people. Think of it. 18,000, not a city, not a region, but the entire planet's population if we follow this model. How could true stone giants be built in such times when almost no one existed on Earth? These mathematical calculations cast doubt on the official version. Such a serious discrepancy suggests that the numbers historians operate with are perhaps only part of the truth, or they do not account for abrupt demographic collapses and population drops that are not discussed. Maybe our history is a series of recoveries after severe global cataclysms, and the gigantic cathedrals are evidence of some other, more ancient time. Such reinterpretation forces us to view history from a different angle. If a small handful of people could not have built these masterpieces, then the builders must be sought in a different time. Perhaps these cathedrals are the legacy of a preceding highly developed civilization that no longer exists. Not just stone buildings, but monuments left to us as a riddle. The structures seem to have survived through the ages, transmitting their remarkable architectural language through symbols and patterns. Griffins, broken arches, mysterious motifs found in France and Spain and even on other continents. Imagine old photographs from the 19th century. In them, medieval buildings already appear worn down, covered with earth, while around them everyday life goes on as if the people living there did not even understand who built these gigantic structures, or for what purpose. These buildings were not newly constructed but restored from ruins, as if people in the Middle Ages were not building, but reclaiming and preserving something ancient and enigmatic. These architectural monuments are not celebrations of simple craftsmanship, but evidence of a long-forgotten epoch. The architectural handwriting of cathedrals and castles shares many elements that cannot be dismissed as coincidence. A unified cultural foundation, a single language of stone. These structures seem to tell the story of another civilization, hidden deep beneath the layers of official chronology. Perhaps the true history of humanity is much more complex and richer than we have been taught. If this is so, then official history is only a mask placed over a centuries-old mystery. The next step is to understand what